Welcome everyone to Diabetes Canada's 2017 Healthy Living webinar series. My name is Farah Ismail and I will be your host for today. We're delighted that you're able to join us today for the webinar to learn about eating well to manage your blood glucose. Now to start off, I'd like to draw your attention to our survey. It's located at the top right-hand section of your screen. In order to better serve your needs, we kindly ask that you provide us with your input by completing a short survey towards the end of today's presentation, and we thank you in advance for your input. Now, throughout the presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, and this can be done by simply typing in your questions in the bottom right-hand section of your webinar screen, and our presenter will be happy to answer them at the end of today's presentation. As well, we will be displaying a few polling questions throughout the presentation and would love for your answers. It is important to note that your responses will remain completely anonymous. Also note that you're able to customize your screens. You can expand and collapse them as you see fit, and this can be done by simply dragging down the bottom right-hand corner of each of the webinar pods you see in front of you. Our presentation today will last about 40 to 45 minutes in length, and we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. I would like to note that our presentation is recorded and will be made available on Diabetes Canada's website in the coming weeks. Our webinar on healthy living has been proudly supported by Weight Watchers Canada. Diabetes Canada recognizes the Weight Watchers Beyond the Scale program as an effective way to lose weight through healthy eating and physical activity. Now I'd like to welcome our speaker, Susan Watson, and thank her for joining us today. Before turning it over to Susan, I'd like to give you a brief introduction. Susan is a registered dietitian, busy mom, and owner of A Little Nutrition. She's been helping clients manage their weight and wellness with meal planning for years and has seen all the challenges that people face when it comes to getting healthy meals on the table. She's found solutions to meal planning for the busy professionals, to stressed out stay-at-home moms to the novice cook. As a nutrition coach, she helps people find the balance between eating healthy and enjoying life without having to pass on flavor. For more information on Susan, please read the speaker bio section, which is located to the left of your screen. So without further ado, I present to you Susan Watson.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming out tonight. I really look forward to getting into this presentation tonight and talk to you about a whole bunch of areas of nutrition and how we can help manage blood glucose. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what diabetes is, and we're going to then look into the dietary management of diabetes. So we're going to touch on foods that affect blood glucose. We're going to look at balanced meals and how to balance your meals effectively. We're going to talk about wise choices, and I kind of call this eat that, not, or eat this, not that, as well as we're going to look at food labels and what to look for when you're at the grocery store and you're looking at the food label, how to evaluate those. And we'll touch a little bit on the benefits of weight loss and exercise. So before we get started, I have a little 3 questions that I want to ask everybody. And this will help me make sure that I touch base on the different areas that you are interested in learning about your nutrition tonight. Let's go look at the poll results. Oh, wow. Okay, so it looks like quite a few people struggle when it comes to their nutrition with meal planning as well as food cravings and that motivation to eat well. So let's go on to the next question. And the question is, do you find it hard to make healthy choices when eating out? So I'll give you a few moments here to take a look at the question and answer it, and we'll take a look at the results. This is mostly because there's a lot of food choices out there that, especially when eating out, can be hard to choose from. So the answers here for the polls is most people, about 75% do. All right, so last question here, and we just want to ask, do you struggle with food cravings? So it was noted in that first question, but this is just going to give me a bit of idea because I'm going to go into some strategies to help you deal with food cravings if a lot of people have that problem. So 87%, absolutely. Thank you for filling out those questions, and let's go into the presentation here. So we're just going to touch a little bit on what diabetes is. So diabetes is a chronic disease, and when we take a look at how it works, we want to take a look at glucose, and it's your main body's fuel source. So I'm going to interchange the words between glucose and sugar. So they're the same thing when I'm talking today. So your body needs insulin, and you need insulin in order to utilize glucose as energy. So when glucose breaks down in your body, you have energy. And without insulin, if your body doesn't use it properly, glucose or sugar will build up in your blood. And this is what's going to cause your blood sugar to rise. So we're going to talk about the effects on diabetes and why it's important to keep your blood sugars under control. So high blood sugars, so if it's not coming down, can lead to blindness and blurred vision, impaired kidney function, chance of heart disease, as well as amputation. So it's very important to take a look at what we can do to manage those blood sugar levels and keep them under control. Food is a very good way of doing that, but we also can do some other things. So self-monitoring your blood glucose levels is very important. Taking some readings and seeing what's going on with the foods that you're eating. Exercise, proper diet, which is what we're going to talk about today. Some people will have to have medication, and some people will have to look at losing weight to help them bring their blood sugars down. So I'm going to go now into a whole bunch of different areas of how we can utilize food to help manage and keep those blood sugars down, and what foods to choose more of and which ones you should limit as well. So we're going to start off with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates raise your blood glucose level, and there's a variety of carbohydrates or foods that have carbohydrates. Some of them are your grains and starches, and that break down to sugar. So some examples would be bread, pasta, rice, corn. Those are all grains, as well as fruits, apples, bananas, orange, or juice. Some starchy vegetables like potatoes and beets, legumes like beans and lentils, and desserts like cakes, cookies, pies, and chocolate. The other one that's in here that I don't have listed is also dairy. Dairy has carbohydrates in it. It's a carbohydrate protein, so we still have to keep in mind that it does have some sugar, natural sugars in it. When we take a look at carbohydrates, some of them have fiber in them. I'm sure you've heard to consume foods with lots of fiber, and I'm going to tell you a little bit why this is important. So fiber is also a carbohydrate, and the nice thing about fiber is it's not broken down into your body as sugar. It never breaks down to sugar. So because of that, it doesn't raise your blood sugar, and it can actually help you lower your blood glucose levels. In that, you can have more of the grains and starch than you would in a food item that doesn't have fiber in it because it doesn't break down to sugar. So we have two types of carbohydrates when we take a look at especially our grains and starches. We have complex carbohydrates, which are very high in fiber, and we have simple carbohydrates, which are low in fiber. So your complex carbohydrates that have high fiber, those are the ones that you're going to want to have a lot of in your diet, because when they break down to sugar in your body, it's not as high of a spike as something like a simple carbohydrate, or you might have heard the term refined carbohydrates. They're very low in fiber. So we're going to talk about the two different types, and I'm going to give you some specific examples of foods that you should have more of and foods that you should limit or try to avoid. As mentioned, the high fiber carbohydrates are the ones that you want to have more of. So we've got whole grain bread and pasta, so the brown pasta on the box, it should say whole grain. We've got brown rice and wild rice. We've got fruits that are intact, not the juice, but the fruit, because it's got a lot of fiber in it from the pulp, as well as sweet potatoes and yams, and beans and lentils and legumes. Those are all great high fiber complex carbohydrates that will not raise your blood sugar as much as something like a low fiber, simple carbohydrate or refined carbohydrate. So some examples of ones that you want to limit or avoid or have in small amounts are going to be white bread or white pasta, white or minute rice, cakes, pies, cookies, candies, as well as white potatoes. So those ones, it doesn't mean you can't have them. You just want to choose the high fiber ones more often. Now we're going to move on to talking about sugars versus sweeteners. So sugar is going to raise your blood sugar, whereas some of the artificial sweeteners, they don't raise your blood sugar. So some examples here, sugar or sweeteners that will raise your blood sugar are going to be sucrose, so that's your table sugar or icing sugar. Honey will raise your blood sugar, maple syrup, brown sugar, and agave. Now, a lot of people might think that honey or maple syrup might be healthier for somebody who's trying to manage their blood sugars, but it really is no different when it goes into our body. It might have a little bit more vitamins or minerals in it, but it doesn't have less sugar in it. It still has the same amount of sugar and will still raise your blood sugar. So you want to limit that as much as you can. Have the least amount that you need. Then we have sweeteners, and sweeteners, artificial sweeteners, do not raise the blood sugar. So those would be like sucralose, or the trade name is Splenda, stevia, aspartame, sorbitol, mannitol, or xylitol. Now, something to note is that the sugar alcohol, so those are the ones that the names end with a OL, so sorbitol, mannitol, and xylitol. Some people find that they have digestive upset stomachs or even diarrhea when they have those sugar alcohols. So if you have a food item that's been baked or made with one of these items, and you have a lot of them because you think, oh, it doesn't have sugar in it, I can have a few more. Don't be misled, because sometimes you might end up getting an upset stomach after having some of these. So again, you just want to be mindful of how much you're consuming. The next nutrient we're going to talk about is protein. And we heard that in the poll at the beginning that cravings were a really strong struggle that many people have. And protein actually will help reduce some of those cravings, because protein will actually help lower the effect of carbohydrates and sugar on your blood glucose levels, and it helps you feel fuller longer, just like fiber. So you want to have that high fiber, and you also want to have protein at each meal. So at breakfast, at lunch, and supper, and also include protein in your snacks. So some examples of protein would be meat and poultry, fish and eggs, nuts and seeds, legumes and beans and lentils, as well as dairy, milk, yogurt, or cheese. The other nutrient that is quite popular to talk about is fat. And when we take a look at foods that break down to sugar and foods that do not break down to sugar, protein, as mentioned, it does not break down to sugar, but fats also do not break down to sugar in your body. So fats will not affect your blood glucose levels, but they can play a role in your health, in your heart health, and also lead to weight gain if consumed in excess. You want to choose unsaturated fats more often, and unsaturated fats are the fats that come from plant-based fats, and you want to choose saturated fats less often, and those are the ones that are coming from animal fats. And you want to avoid at all costs any trans fats. So trans fats are what you're going to find in foods that are in a can, box, or package that might have a shelf year of 7 years plus, and I'm thinking of some of those foods that you might purchase around the coffee center at a gas station, those baked goods in a plastic wrapper. Those ones often have a lot of trans fat in them, and a lot of like crackers or cookies or cakes that might come in a box or a package, you want to take a look at the label and make sure that it says 0 trans fat. And the reason why is that trans fat, there's no safe levels, and we don't want to be consuming those in our diet. Again, just looking as an overview of the different types of fats, We want to limit those saturated fats. So if you're having meat, you want to go with lean cuts of meat and make sure that they don't have a lot of fat on them. Eggs, the yolk is where you're going to find the saturated fat. Some of the high-fat dairy, milk and cheese and yogurt, those will have saturated fat in it. Butter, lard, coconut, and palm oil, as well as shortening shortening has the trans fat in it. So you want to have the saturated fat, but in a small amount and limit it as much as you can. But you do want to include more often your unsaturated fats. So those are fats that you'll find naturally occurring in nuts and seeds, peanuts, nut and seed butters, avocado, or something like olive oil or canola oil. So those are your natural unsaturated fats. Now, just a little tip that I came across a couple weeks ago was I find sometimes when I tell clients that they should, limit their butter, and they really are upset by it because they love their butter. I found a way that you can combine butter with your unsaturated fats to still have all the great taste of butter, but lower that saturated fat amount. So what you can do is in a blender or a food processor, you can take equal parts of butter with an unsaturated oil like canola oil or olive oil and blend that up and put it into a container that you can store in the fridge. And it's actually very spreadable, just like margarine. And you can utilize it in any of your cooking or baking as well. And you're cutting the saturated fat by half by mixing in one of the other unsaturated oils like olive oil and canola oil. So just thought I'd give you that little tip, and I've done it myself. It works great. You just want to keep that mixture in the fridge. Now let's move on to what happens at a meal when we have, breakfast, lunch, and supper, and what our plate should look like. And I like to talk about it by calling it balance your plate. So the first thing you want to think about doing is you want to avoid skipping meals. So if you go too long between meals, what happens then is it's very hard to make healthy and wise choices if you get too hungry, or some people like to call it hangry. And by having your 3 meals a day and 2 to 3 snacks in between those meals, you keep your blood sugar stable so that you don't have any dips or peaks by overeating too much, and just help keep your blood sugar stable. So I've got some pictures right here of what a balanced plate should look like. And you want to aim to have half of your plate vegetables, a quarter of your plate lean protein, and a quarter of your plate your grain and starch. And then, if you're still hungry after that, finishing off your meal with a piece of fruit or a glass of milk on the side. So you can see these photos of what some balanced meals look like, but you can see that most of the meal is bulked up with vegetables. And the reason why is vegetables, again, don't break down to sugar, and they help you feel fuller longer because of all the fiber that's in them. And when you're thinking about trying to reduce food cravings, the number one sabotager to any healthy eating plan is hunger. So you want to keep feeling full, and having extra vegetables, or at least 2 cups of vegetables at lunch and supper, that's going to help you feel fuller longer in between meals as well. So here's an example of a dinner plate that someone would have. So you have a salad with maybe some steamed vegetables, which work out to being about half of your plate, and then a quarter cup of starches, and then, or a quarter of your plate starches, and then a quarter of your plate protein. And that was your balanced plates. And then we can talk a little bit about portions. So when it comes to portions, these are recommended portion sizes, and it's recommended to have 1 to 2 of these portions in a meal. So if we take a look at fruit, a healthy portion would be about half a cup or 1 piece of fruit. And if you're having a meal, 1 to 2 portions would be okay. So if you're having a serving of fruit, half a cup to a cup of fruit is perfectly okay. When it comes to vegetables, you can see a healthy portion is 2 cups. We want to have lots of vegetables and fill ourselves up with those low-calorie, high-fiber, wonderful vegetables. Then we've got grains. So a serving of cooked grains is going to be half a cup. And at a meal, lunch or supper or even breakfast, half a cup to a cup, so 2 portions would be a healthy serving. So that's the same with your starches. Nuts and seeds, a serving is 1/4 of a cup. Nut butters would be 2 tablespoons. A serving of milk would be a cup. And this is very, you should measure it out. If you're one of the people that go to the fridge and just pour yourself a glass, next time you go to the fridge, get out a measuring cup and actually measure out what 1 cup of milk looks like. Because again, milk is a liquid calorie, and we want to eat our food, not drink it. And sometimes if we're not paying attention to how much we pour, we could be pouring quite a large serving of milk and having it actually be double of what we need. When we take a look at yogurt, 3/4 of a cup. Meat would be 3 ounces. 3 to 5 ounces would be a good serving for our dinner meal. Legumes, 3/4 of a cup, and fat would be 1 teaspoon. Now, if you don't carry around a set of measuring cups when you're plating your food, or if you're out at a restaurant, which I don't think most people do, the hand jive method is also a good way of just doing a quick check to see if the serving that you're having is more or in line. It's not an exact science, but I like to use this method when I'm guesstimating what's been served to me at a restaurant. So a tight fist would be roughly about half a cup. An open hand would be roughly about 1 cup. The size of your palm without the fingers would be a serving size of around 3 ounces. And the full length of your thumb would be about 1 ounce. And the tip of your tongue is about 1 teaspoon. So again, these serving portion sizes, it's not an exact science because everybody has different size hands. Mine's pretty small. Other people have large hands. But, it's not that it has to be exact. It just gives you a good way of guesstimating maybe when you don't have tools to do so. I'm going to move on to now, we're going to look at sample meal ideas of what an appropriate amount for breakfast, lunch, and supper could be for a meal. And I've given some examples of different food items that you can pair together to show the balanced meal, so at least 3 food groups, as well as how much you should consume of the foods that break down to sugar, those carbohydrates, to make sure that you're not overtaxing your blood sugar and that you're able to still bring it down after a meal. So it's going to depend on your age, weight, height, and gender and how much carbohydrates your body needs at each meal. But a good starting point and a good kind of middle of the road amount for anybody would be between 45 and 60 grams of carbohydrates. Some people for a meal might only have 15 to 30, and some people might have up to 75 grams of carbohydrates. But we're just going to look at between 45 and 60 grams so that you can get an idea of a ballpark amount of how much food is appropriate for a meal. So we're looking at breakfast. 45 grams of carbohydrates would look like 3/4 of a cup of hot cereal like oatmeal, 1 cup of low-fat milk, and 1 cup of berries. And if we're looking at the 60-gram carbohydrate serving, we'd have 2 slices of whole grain toast, peanut butter, an apple, and a cup of low-fat milk. And we take a look at the foods that break down to sugar and the ones that don't. In the 60-gram carbohydrate, we've got the toast is going to break down to sugar, so each slice will be about 15 grams. Now the peanut butter, it doesn't break down to sugar, so that's not calculated into the 60 grams. And an apple will be about 15 grams of carbohydrates, and a glass of milk will be about 15 grams of carbohydrates. So that's one example of a breakfast. And another example here would be 45 grams would be 2 scrambled eggs, and that's your protein. It doesn't break down to sugar. Then we've got a cup of milk, a slice of whole grain toast, and 15 grapes. That would equal about 45 grams of carbohydrate. As well as when it comes to the 60 gram, we've got 3/4 of a cup plain yogurt, a 1/4 cup of low-fat granola, 2 cups of raspberries, which are they're very low in sugar, a slice of whole grain toast, and a teaspoon of margarine. Sounds like a great breakfast. Moving on to lunch, an example of a 45-gram carbohydrate lunch, we would have 1 cup of vegetable soup with a cup of salad, a whole grain bun or dinner roll, 2 ounces of turkey breast, orange, and a teaspoon of mustard and light mayo on that bun. 60 grams would be 2 slices of whole grain bread, 2 ounces of lean roast beef, a cup of low-fat milk, a cup of assorted vegetables, a pear, and then a teaspoon of mustard or light mayo. Another example would be 45 grams of carbohydrate, would be 2 slices of whole grain bread, half a cup of tuna, 1 teaspoon of light mayo, a cup of carrots, and an apple. And for 60 grams of carbohydrates, we got 4 small pierogies, and that would really depend on the brand and where you would get them, but just take a look at the back of the package and it'll tell you how many pierogies you can have for X amount of carbohydrates, and you can plug it into how many you should be having for a meal. 2 ounces of lean ham, a cup of low-fat milk, a cup of carrots, half a cup of peas, and 1 teaspoon of light sour cream. Moving on to dinner, some examples of a healthy dinner, a balanced meal, would be a 45-gram portion, would be 3 ounces of salmon, half a cup of brown rice, 2 cups of assorted vegetables, 1 cup of milk, and 2 plums. A little bit larger meal would be about 3 ounces of chicken, a medium baked potato with some sour cream and some low-fat milk, a cup of green beans, a cup of carrots, and half a cup of fruit salad maybe as a dessert. And I just want to note that you want to choose to have the fruit salad that you purchase that says it's packed in water or packed in its own juices, not in syrup or juice, because those will just add a little bit too much sugar to what you're eating. Another example would be for a 45-gram carbohydrate dinner, 2.5 ounces of cooked pork chop, 1 small multigrain dinner roll, half a cup of corn, half a cup of peas, a cup of carrots, and a cup of milk. A 60-gram carbohydrate example would be 1 cup of whole wheat pasta, 4 small meatballs, half a cup of tomato sauce, a 2-cup salad, 1 tablespoon of light salad dressing, a cup of milk, and a cup of berries. So that is basically roughly what a healthy balanced meal would look like, but it's also really important to have those snacks in between meals to keep your energy up and so that you don't get too hungry in between meals and then overdo it when you get to that meal time. So some examples of some healthy snacks would be taking a look at that 15-gram carbohydrate amount would be 1 medium fruit, and that could be an apple, an orange, a pear, and if it's a banana, you want to just take a look at how large it is. Some bananas can be a lot more than 15 grams carbohydrates, but it's about what could fit into a 1 cup measure, a half a cup measure, and some bananas are very, very large. Then 1 cup of berries, and berries are low in sugar, so you can have a nice large portion of those. 3/4 cup plain yogurt is 15 grams of carbohydrates. A piece of toast with peanut butter is 15 grams, or some dried fruit, about 2 tablespoons, and 1/4 cup of nuts and seeds. So those are great snack ideas to keep your energy up in between meals. And an example of a 30-gram carbohydrate snack would be a cup of chocolate milk. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, why are you recommending chocolate milk? Well, chocolate milk will have some protein in it, and the protein will actually help you feel full. And I think sometimes people get chocolate cravings. I know I do. And when you have a chocolate craving, you're faced with, do I have chocolate? What can I do to fix that chocolate craving? And sometimes a cup of chocolate milk, because it has that protein in it, will actually satisfy that chocolate craving, and you can get away with having that versus going towards having a chocolate bar. Another example would be 3/4 of a cup whole grain cereal with a cup of milk, or half of a sandwich with medium fruit, or 3/4 of a cup plain yogurt with a cup of berries, or a cup of applesauce with walnuts. All great 30-gram carbohydrate snacks. Now, when we talk about desserts, there's a little bit of a misconception with some desserts that have been baked with artificial sweeteners, so we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. But desserts such as cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream, they're all made with those simple carbohydrates, and that means they don't have any fiber in them, and they break down to sugar in our body really, really fast. So what we want to do is we want to limit the amount of desserts that we have to about 2 times a week, or the least amount that you need to enjoy your life, and opt for small amounts of fruit every other evening, or have a little bit of fruit after your meal if you have that sweet tooth. And desserts made with no sugar sweeteners, they will actually still raise your blood sugar because of the effects of white flour. So they should also be limited. And so if somebody has baked you a, say, a cookie with Splenda, and we think that maybe it's going to be lower in sugar, so it's okay for you, it'll be lower in sugar than if it was baked with sugar, but it will still have, it will still break down to sugar, and it will still raise your blood sugar, maybe not as much as the original counterpart, but don't think that it is completely sugar-free, because that's not the case. The white flour will still break down to sugar in your body. So now I'm going to move into the section that I call Eat This, Not That, and it will give you some ideas of different food choices that you can choose that are healthier over its counterpart. So instead of white or rye bread or white buns, you want to choose your whole grain, multigrain, or pumpernickel bread. It's going to be higher in fiber, higher in B vitamins, and help you feel fuller longer after a meal. And I think a lot of people get surprised when I tell them that rye bread is actually white bread. And I've had some clients that have moved from white bread to rye bread thinking it was a healthier choice. But I just want to let you know that it is mostly white bread with a little bit of rye added to it, and that the better option is going to be your whole grain or your multigrain pumpernickel bread that says made with 100% whole grains. And when you take a look at the back of the label, a slice of whole grain bread will have between 4 to 5 grams of fiber, and that's the product that you want to purchase at the store, whereas the white bread will usually say 0 on it. When it comes to different types of meats that you could buy in the store or cooking methods, you want to try to go mostly with ones that are baked, steamed, poached, grilled, roasted, or stir-fried foods versus the breaded, battered, or fried or deep-fried foods. So when a food item is battered or breaded, that batter or bread is actually going to raise your blood sugar as well, whereas a piece of plain chicken breast will not raise your blood sugar. It's pure protein. If it's been battered or breaded, it will raise your blood sugar a bit. Some healthier choices: instead of chips, try popping up some air popped popcorn and have it lightly salted with low-fat butter, or put on just a very small amount. When it comes to soups, instead of those cream-based soups, try to go with broth-based soups and try to get ones that are packed with vegetables in them. When it comes to meat, instead of red meat or meat that has a lot of fat on it, try to choose white meat, poultry, or fish more often. Instead of Caesar salad, try a garden salad with light Italian dressing. Instead of cakes, pies, pastries, and cookies, try to choose fruit more often and have fruit as your dessert or your treat. It's not always going to be the case, but if you can do that more often, that's going to be a better choice. When it comes to ice cream, a really good fix would be to try plain frozen yogurt. Sometimes what I've done is I've actually taken yogurt and frozen berries and blended them and made my own ice cream, and that's going to be a lot lower in sugar than regular flavored ice cream. Now, when it comes to breakfast cereals, a lot of people, I think it's marketed that Rice Krispies and Cheerios are going to be healthy for you, but they actually have no fiber in them, and they break down to sugar in our body really fast. So if you want to have those food items, you want to mix in some bran cereal, so like Bran Buds or All Bran into the cereal, as well as there's no protein in those cereals as well. So if you really do want to have the Cheerios or the Rice Krispies or any of those highly processed breakfast cereals, add some protein. So add some almonds, add some pecans, and bulk up that fiber and protein to those cereals. But really, you want to just choose cereals more often that have a lot of fiber in them. So when it takes a look at a serving for your fiber in cereals, you want to have ones that are at least 3 to 5 grams of fiber or higher per serving. So instead of white potatoes, try sweet potatoes or yams. You can also try cauliflower mash instead of white potatoes, where you cook up a cauliflower and mash it up and add your sour cream and chives. It's really delicious. Very low in sugar. Instead of juice, you want to try to have infused water with like lemon or fruit. There's lots of recipes on the internet for adding mint and berries to water to flavor it up. One of my favorites too is, we'll talk about it in a moment too, is the plain brewed iced tea. Instead of French fries, try to ask for a salad or split the French fries with your dining partner. Instead of salt, you want to try using herbs or pepper to flavor your food versus salt. Instead of soda pop, again, try that fresh brewed iced tea. It's one of my favorite things to do this summer. And all I do is I take some tea bags of my favorite flavor, and I'll brew up some hot tea and then put it in the fridge to cool off, add some lemon slices, and when I'm ready to have a drink, I'll just add more water. It tends to concentrate a little bit, add some ice, and it's really refreshing, especially on a hot day. Instead of jam, you want to choose your nut butters or peanut butters. So there are some jams in the market where they're just fruit purees. Those ones are good to choose. And there's also ones that have been sweetened with artificial sweetener. So those would be better choices that'll say no sugar added jam. And instead of jam altogether, if you want to try peanut butter instead, that's a good choice. But you want to make sure that the peanut butter you choose is an all-natural one, or that the one that you choose does not have any added sugar. A lot of the nut butters or the peanut butters will have icing sugar added to them. So you want to make sure that yours doesn't have that. And a lot of the times the natural peanut butters will have oil on the top. And if you just turn that jar upside down and put it in your fridge, when you go ahead and open it for the first time, all of the oil will be mixed in. And then you just take your peanut butter and put the lid back on and put it in the fridge upside down again. You don't have to worry about stirring it up. When we take a look at those nutrition facts labels when you're at the store and trying to figure out what items are better to choose than others, the first thing you want to take a look at is comparing the serving sizes to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. So you can see right here it says 1 cup, and we're comparing to label B, which is 1 cup. So we know that the nutrition facts is going to be comparable. The next thing you want to take a look at is the carbohydrates. That's going to be what will raise your blood sugar. And you want to choose ones that are going to be lower. And then you also want to take a look at the dietary fiber and choose ones that are going to have the higher fiber between the two choices. And then you want to take a look at the sugars and make sure the one that you're choosing has the lower sugars between the two. Another example here would be some crackers. So we can take a look at, this is a good tricky one for you guys. We've got one that's 9 crackers and one that's 4, but if we look at the weight, they're both roughly around the same size. So I would assume the one with 9 crackers are just thinner crackers than the ones that are 4, because the serving size works out to being about the same. The calories are roughly the same. We take a look at the carbohydrates, and cracker B is about 15 grams and cracker A is 12. But when we look at the fiber, cracker B has 3 grams of fiber, which is a lot higher. And we can actually subtract the fiber from the carbohydrate for a lower net carbohydrate. And, then we take a look at the sugars. So they are actually really close to being the same once you subtract that fiber, but I would choose the one that has higher amount of fiber. So cracker B would be the better choice. And finally, to just finish off here, when it comes to weight loss and exercise, a moderate amount of weight loss, even 5%, may help you lower your blood glucose levels. So we really want to think about things that you can do to achieve a healthy weight. And exercising regularly can help you control your blood glucose levels. So you want to do as much as you can to stay off your butt and get moving, walking, chair exercises, and anything that you can do to, I call it reduce the lap, and that's from sitting down. And, if you haven't done a lot of exercise before, you want to make sure you consult your doctor before starting any new exercise routine. So we're going to now finish it off. We're on to the end here, and we'll open it up to some questions that I will pass it back to Sarah for going over the questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. That was an amazing webinar, and you really provided us with some great insight into eating well to manage our blood glucose levels. So exactly as Susan has mentioned, we will be taking some questions at this time. I know there's been quite a few that have come in, so I do want to let you folks know that if we don't get to your questions, I do apologize, but you're more than welcome to email us at webinars@diabetes.ca, and we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. So with that being said, I'll start off with our first kind of group of questions. So Susan, this kind of gets back to the artificial sweeteners discussion that we had earlier. So we have one of our participants is asking, why do they get a sore stomach from eating too much? And then kind of a part two to that is, to your knowledge, does it make you crave more sweets if you increase your intake of artificial sweetener?
Those are really great questions. I'm glad that you asked them. So the first part is, why does it make you have a sore stomach? And it's due to the sugar alcohol that's used in the artificial sweetener. It's poorly digested in our body, and basically in some people, because it's poorly digested, it causes upset stomach, gas, diarrhea, cramping, and there's a couple different cookie brands on the market that, will state on the package, no sugar added. And I've had some clients, go to the store and they think it's a win because, oh, these are great. I can have as many as I want because there's no sugar added. And even on the label, it will show very, very low sugar. But they're now starting to put on the package sugar alcohols on the label. And you can see it's got 0 grams of regular sugar, but it might have 10 grams of sugar alcohol. So those ones I would caution having large amounts of those, or even some people actually have symptoms just 1 or 2. So you might be lucky and have no symptoms, but if you are having a lot of foods with that are sugar reduced and are sugar reduced with sugar alcohols, and you're also having IBS symptoms like gas, cramping, bloating, that might be one of the culprits. And the only way to really do anything about that is to avoid the sugar alcohol. And then the other question came about, can you repeat the second part of the question?
Yeah.
The artificial sweeteners?
Yeah, the next
or
participant.
The other part of it.
Yeah, the next participant was just asking about if it makes them crave more if they increase their intake of artificial sweeteners.
Yes. Okay, so when we ingest sweet in our body recognizes sweet and has different chemical reactions in our body. And realistically, when we bring into our body something that's sweet, our brain is expecting something behind it, like calories. And when it doesn't have calories behind it, our brain is a little bit confused. And we do know that sweet is sweet, and that artificial sweeteners are sometimes 10 times, if not more, sweeter than regular sugar. So if sweet is sweet and we're consuming an artificial sweetener, even though there's no calories behind it, our brain is still recognizing sweet. And I do notice that some people who have gone from, say, regular pop to diet pop, those sugar cravings have increased, and those cravings for sugar overall have increased, and they've gone from going, say, 1 can of regular pop a day to 2 or 3 diet pops because of that sugar craving. So I would say that some of the artificial sweeteners can raise sugar cravings because they are a lot sweeter than the normal counterpart. And really the recommendation when it comes to any sweeteners is to just decrease the sweet in your diet. And it takes a long time for our bodies and our tongue to get happy with a lower sugar taste. But the only way to do it is to really just start reducing where you can. And if you've noticed you've gone from your sugar cravings have increased, take a look at how much artificial sweetener you are having. And if it's in a large amount, you would want to reduce that just like you would want to reduce regular sugar. But it's not going to raise your blood sugar, but it might make those food cravings a little bit stronger, or the sugar cravings a little bit stronger.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Susan. We've had a couple folks ask us questions specific to nuts and seeds. Do you have particular recommendations of which nuts to consume as a good healthy snack versus others?
Okay, so that's a great question. In weight management terms, I would recommend going with the hard nuts. So the nuts that when you crunch, they're definitely hard to chew. So something like an almond or a walnut or a pecan versus something like a cashew or cashews or peanuts. The reason why I would recommend the hard nuts over the soft nuts is soft nuts tend to be more inhalable. So it has, when it comes to diabetes, all are the same. You can have whatever ones you want. But when it comes to weight management, we do recommend the harder nuts because your jaw is going to get sore before you overconsume almonds, right? Or that's the thought. Whereas cashews or peanuts, people tend to crave or eat those in larger amounts because they're easier to chew, easier to inhale. So that would be my recommendation, is go with the harder nuts. And when it comes to seeds, I don't think that there's any pros or cons to either like pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds. You just want to go with the ones that are unsalted. And if you want to add a little bit more flavor to them, fire up your oven and toast them a little bit, because that will add a lot more flavor to them as well. Hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you for that, Susan. We have had a few folks ask about alcohol intake and if there is a particular allowable limit. For example, this participant has asked if it's okay to drink 1 to 2 ounces of red wine 2 to 3 times a week, or as if there's a particular recommendation around that.
Okay, the health recommendations for alcohol for people with diabetes would be that for men, it's 1 to 2 standard drinks, and for women, or 1 to 2 standard drinks a day, and for women, it would be 1 standard drink a day. And a standard drink would be 1 can of beer or 5 ounces of wine. So again, it's liquid calories, it's liquid sugar, and you want to limit it to the least amount that you need to enjoy your life and be happy with your food choices. But you want to limit it for sure, because it's a bit of a double whammy with the sugar intake behind it. And when it comes to what might be better or worse, it's really portion amount. So 1 ounce of hard liquor would be a serving as well. And you also want to take a look at maybe your mix, if you're having hard liquor, what you're putting it with. And not be mixing it with regular pop and having a whole can of pop plus the alcohol as well. So the recommendations are a little bit more liberal than what this participant had asked, but again, you want to try to limit it as much as you can.
Great, thank you for that. We have had a couple folks looking for some clarification. When we were referencing a low-fat milk as the preferred option, is there a percentage specifically that you'd recommend, Susan?
I recommend anything from skim 1% to 2%. The 3.25% and higher tends to get a little bit high in saturated fat, especially if you're drinking it as for hydration. You're just getting extra calories and fat that your body doesn't need, whereas anywhere from skim to 2% will be fine. Again, you want to take a look at liquid calories and take a look at how much you're consuming versus drinking water to hydrate. But anything between skim to 2% is fine. And if you're going with say a milk alternative like almond or soy milk, you just want to take a look at the back of the package, and if it's flavored, take a look at the amount of sugar that's been added to it and try to go with the plain or the natural flavored ones.
Great, thank you for that, Susan. Our next participant has asked, is there a particular amount of sugar that I should be looking for or looking for a maximum for on a label?
Again, you want to go with most likely the least, and it would really depend on the product that you're purchasing. But I do recommend to try to say it's a granola bar. You want to go with anything that's less than 10 grams of sugar. And some granola bars are, they look very healthy, but they're equivalent in sugar to a Mars bar, which is quite deceiving. So it depends on the product, but so something like a granola bar, 10 grams of sugar or less. And we want to take a look at the amount of sugar to, consume in a day. And 50 grams in a day is really hard to achieve, but if you can stay in and around that, that's not necessarily including your natural sugars. So there's going to be natural sugars from fruit and some vegetables, but we're talking about added sugar versus say natural sugar. Around 10 grams per serving would be a good recommendation, or about 50, depending on your age, weight, height, and gender, about 50 grams a day would be. That's what the World Health Organization recommends right now.
Great, thank you for that, Susan. We do have a couple participants that are looking for some suggestions and recommendations specific to a vegetarian diet, so perhaps some protein suggestions that you might be able to recommend.
Yes, excellent. The other question we had was if someone didn't like the beans and lentils, but so protein suggestions for non-meat sources. My favorite really are the nuts and the seeds and the nut butters that go along with those. So there's almond butter, there's peanut butter, there's cashew butter. Those are all great protein sources. And you can actually make protein energy bites by using the butters mixed with, say, oatmeal to make a little bit of an energy bite. But we know that beans and lentils and pulses are also very high in protein. Hemp hearts as well are great sources. Food items like tofu and tempeh are also great protein sources that will give you some protein. And protein is in a lot of different things. Like even our bread has some protein, so you can take a look at that. Some of our grains, like quinoa, has a lot of protein in it. It's a bit of a complete protein with your grains and starches. So there's a lot of options. You don't have to have animal meat when it comes to getting that protein in. I hope that gives you some solutions.
Great, thanks for that, Susan. Our next participant has asked, when combining butter and canola oil for the substitution piece, is there a particular ratio you would recommend?
Oh, I apologize. I thought I had mentioned it. I've done 50-50, and so I would do 1 cup of butter with 1 cup of canola oil, but it really is going to depend on, I think, the temperature of your house too, because the canola oil will be liquid at room temperature. So you might want to start with your 1 cup of butter and start blending it and get it to a consistency that you're happy with spreading onto your food items. If you're going to be spreading it onto something like toast, it might feel a little bit like it waters down your toast. Whereas if you're putting it on vegetables, it doesn't really matter. So a 50-50 mix might be fine. Whereas you might want to do 1 cup to half a cup of canola oil if you're wanting to spread it on toast or something that you still want to stay crisp. Great question.
Great, thanks for that, Susan. I am being a little cognizant of the time, folks, so I'm just going to take one more question here before we close off. But I do want to remind you that if we didn't get to your question today, I do apologize and would like you to send us a quick email at webinars@diabetes.ca, and we'll be happy to assist you there. So with that being said, Susan, our last question here is there a negative impact on eating too late and how that might affect my blood glucose levels?
You know, it's different for everybody, and I do recommend that self-monitoring your blood glucose level. So with your monitor, and test what happens to your blood sugar in the morning if you've eaten really late at night, or versus a couple hours before bed, and see what happens, because it's going to be different for everybody. And really, what you want to do is take a look at what your body needs for the whole day. So if your calorie limit for the day, or what your body needs to maintain a healthy weight, is say 1,500 to 1,800 calories, you don't really want to save it up all to the end of the day to eat it. You want to space it out all throughout the day so that your body's burning it off when you're most active. And if you're eating really, really late at night, your body doesn't have that opportunity to burn it off. But if you're hungry and it's bedtime and you want to have something just to take that edge off, something around 150 to 200 calories would be totally fine to have before you go to bed, and it's not going to impact your weight. In some cases, with some people, it might help manage that morning blood sugar by having a snack. Some people, it doesn't make any difference. And if it was something that was very high in sugar, it might impact your blood sugar. So you want to do some of that self-monitoring testing to find out for yourself personally how it might impact you. And I think more importantly, it's going to be the quantity that you have before bed versus the time that you're having it. So I hope that kind of answers what you're looking for.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Susan. So folks, as I mentioned, that does conclude our webinar for today. I'd sincerely like to thank Susan for speaking on behalf of Diabetes Canada. It's been a great learning experience. Do want to remind everyone that our webinar today has been recorded and will be made available at diabetes.ca in the coming weeks. We also have some upcoming webinars for the Healthy Living series. So next week we'll be talking all about exercise and accidental exercise. And the following week thereafter that, on June the 6th, we'll be talking about making the most of your food dollar. So we do hope that you'll participate and join us then. To find more information and to register, please visit diabetes.ca/webinars. As well, to view past webinars, also go to the same link. There'll be a tab on the left-hand side of the screen called Past Webinars, and you'll have access to all the webinars that we've done here at Diabetes Canada, so be sure to check those out. For those of you looking for additional support and resources to live well with diabetes, please feel free to call our toll-free line at 1-800-BANTES. That's 1-800-226-8464. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed learning with Diabetes Canada, and we look forward to your participation in the future.